All right, we are live. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the Greater Grand Rapids NAACP Part 2 of our Clean School Bus webinar. For those of you who are just now attending, this is an initiative uh, that has been spearheaded by the national organization. And really, the whole goal is to get information to community members about how we can better advocate for clean school buses in our community. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation shortly. Our apologies for starting the stream a few minutes late, but we're going to give it a couple minutes for others to go ahead and join in, and then we'll get started here shortly. If you have any comments or questions as we're going through the presentation, you can feel free to put those in the comment section, and we'll be addressing those as we go. Um, Other than that, just bear with us, and we will start the presentation here shortly. All right. Just about ready to go. I want to thank everybody for joining us, those who are able to spend some time with us on this Tuesday evening to go over some really important information. We're going to try to keep this brief and short and sweet. We assume the presentation should take about 30 minutes approximately, and we'll make sure to save time for Q&A and give you all some information about what next steps look like as far as this effort. If we could, production, if you can, go ahead and add the slide deck to the stream and we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started shortly. We can get the slides up. All right. Just waiting on our production team to add the slides and we'll go ahead and get started. While we're doing that, I'll go ahead and give you all just a little bit more background information about how this initiative came about. Again, this was a advocacy initiative that was spearheaded by the national organization. That's the director of the director of the Center for Environmental and Climate Justice, Ms. Abray Connor, and her team at the national office. And really saw this as an opportunity to kind of tackle a couple of things at once, right? We understand the uh, number of school buses that unfortunately underserved kids have to travel. Oh, here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. Yeah. So that was kind of how it was spearheaded, with understanding the issues as it relates in our community to asthma and air quality. And National saw this as a perfect opportunity to engage with the EPA and others on really getting the funding down to the communities that need it the most so that we can go ahead and make our communities healthier. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start the slide deck. Here's a quick agenda as to how the session is going to go. We're going to start with a little bit of background information, some of the stuff that I just recently touched on, letting you know kind of how this came about. Then we're going to jump into some of the health impacts, right? Talk about social determinants of health and how this is impacting our communities and our everyday lives. We want to talk about the economic impacts, right? And what are the possibilities as we transition to renewable energy? How can we help build on the economic infrastructure in our communities? We're going to dive a little bit deeper into electric school buses and the technology surrounding that. Then we want to talk about the EPA funding, right? That's where we can advocate to get the funding directly to Grand Rapids Public Schools so that we can electrify our school buses for a healthier community. We'll touch on a few other announcements, a little bit about school board engagement, and then we'll open it up for Q&A before we close out. So as I was mentioning, as we were waiting for the stream to begin, that national office had reached out. I serve in the role as the Michigan Environmental Climate Justice Leader for the state of Michigan. So I attend monthly environmental climate justice calls with the national organization. Environmental climate justice advocates from over the country attend these calls, and it's very just informational to see what other work is going on with other branches in the country. As you all know, there's over 2,200 NAACP branches, and there's a lot of great work being done in this environmental climate justice space. So I attended one of those calls a couple months ago, learned about this initiative, and wanted to make sure that our community was aware of the information and what we need to do to advocate for funding to purchase clean school buses. All right, so a little bit of background about the series again. As you see here, in the conversation of equity in the environmental space, this is not a new conversation for NAACP. Ever since 2018, the NAACP has been a sponsor of Transit Equity Day, which is actually Rosa Parks' birthday on February 4th. And this year, they saw this as an opportunity to expand and amplify on transit equity as a civil right with this initiative around a public education series centering the electrification of school buses. Again, environmental climate justice is not a new space of advocacy for NAACP. We saw Martin Luther King Jr. and others advocating for the rights of Memphis sanitation workers decades ago as it relates to the environmental conditions. So this has been a part of the work and the thread of the NAACP for a long time, and see this as a perfect opportunity to take it to the next level. So again, from the onset of transit equity, this has been a matter of principle, right? As we talk about rapid transition of our transit and school bus systems to electric. So it's not just school buses, but this is the conversation we're having today. It's specific to school buses, but there's a whole larger conversation about how can we transition to more clean energy with our transit systems, with our personal vehicles, et cetera, right? So this is just one part of a much bigger initiative. Today, the opportunity for school districts in the U.S. to replace their current fleets that are currently powered by toxic diesel fuel, they have a possibility if they receive funding from the EPA to change that, right? And make their buses healthier and safer, for BIPOC students and underserved communities across the country. So, what is the EPA's Clean Bus Program, and why is the NAACP interested? So, there was funding from the most recent bipartisan infrastructure law that delegated $5 billion over the next 5 years to this EPA's Clean School Bus Program. And the whole goal is to replace, again, the existing school buses with more healthier school buses that operate outside of diesel fuel. So lots of money on the table. The first round of funds were distributed last year in 2022. and they're going to continue to distribute those funds throughout 2026. So we want to make sure that our community is at the forefront and able to take advantage, and that's why we're hosting this public education series. As I mentioned before, Black communities continue to suffer from the disproportionate impacts of climate and environmental pollution. I'm sure you all have heard issues in our community as it relates to lead levels, all the way to air pollution, to vapor intrusion, to the water that we drink and use in our homes. There's been lead levels right here in 49507 in Grand Rapids that are even higher than in some areas of Flint. So it's a real issue, not just here in Grand Rapids, Third Ward, but across the city, across the state, across the nation. And we are doing our part to make sure that we're bringing more education and awareness to the issues, but also thinking of solutions, and not only just solutions as it relates to the cleanup and remediation, but we understand with this whole transition, there's an influx of opportunities when we talk about workforce development and entrepreneurial with the EV infrastructure, solar, you name it. So we want to make sure that our communities are able to benefit from those economic opportunities as well. So state conferences, branches, and units can ensure that their NAACP's perspectives are centered and prioritized in conversations regarding implementation and next steps. And we want to hear from you all. Is this a great idea? How can we go about? How can we synergize and build community here locally to advocate for that and get our local school district to get on the waiting list, because it is a waiting list currently for this funding. The electric school bus program, it's all about removing diesel air pollution from our communities. We know that diesel pollution is linked to asthma and other conditions that harm children's health. Again, going back to asthma as one of the main health issues, the highest level of asthma rates amongst children, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear me say, are also in 49507. So a real issue, again, across the city, across the county, but specifically Third Ward, where the majority of people of color in the city reside. They're being hit the hardest. So we want to make sure that we do our part to change that. With this initiative, they're going to have an opportunity to phase out diesel engines, and that'll ensure cleaner air for students, for bus drivers, for school staff, for everyone who lives in the community, for business owners who drive and live in these communities every day. The Clean School Bus program will do three things. It'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It'll save the school district a little bit of money, and we'll talk about that here on one of the upcoming slides. And it's going to produce cleaner air, which we know has multiple positive impacts if we can have cleaner air in our communities. Again, as I'm going through the presentation, if you do have any questions, comments, feel free to go ahead and put that in the comment section, and we will address that here later in the presentation. But I want to make sure that we're creating space for you all to engage as well. So let's talk a little bit about air quality impacts, right, and how it impacts children's health. So children who have higher exposures to air pollution, children do have higher exposures to air pollution. One, because they're outside more, right? They're outside. Most schools go to recess at least a couple times a day. And it's usually during those peak times where air quality isn't the best, right? Children are also more vulnerable to air pollution because they're young, right? Their bodies are still developing, and they breathe more air per pound of body weight than adults do. So it specifically affects children at a higher rate. Traffic air pollutants include possible harmful chemicals in gasoline, diesel exhaust, and most importantly, particulate matter. And lastly, health impacts associated with poor indoor and outdoor air. It can include stuff like decreased lung size and function, again, asthma, acute respiratory illnesses, emphysema, and even some types of cancer. I'm sure you all have heard of areas down in Louisiana. There's a stretch between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and they call it Cancer Alley, specifically because of all the pollution coming from the fuel companies in that area. So big issue. And we have one question. Yes, Christina, we'll make sure that the slides are available. We are also, I believe we're recording this. So we'll make sure to post this presentation on the YouTube page. So others can on the NAACP YouTube page, so it can be viewed at a later time. But we'll make sure that the presentation is also available. We'll see if we can get that added to the website, but we'll make sure that the branch has that available for you all as well. All right, so air pollutants. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So ground level ozone is it's formed when air pollution from cars, power plants, and factories interact with sunlight and heat. And the ozone irritates lungs and it can trigger asthma attacks. So we see people who live in these communities with lower air quality have more visits to the emergency room. They have to use their inhalers more. With a clean school bus, we will be able to clean school bus program, if properly funded, will be able to change and kind of mitigate some of those health issues. Soot is another one. Soot is a certain kind of air pollution that comes from cars, power plants, and factories, and sometimes you'll hear it called PM or particulate matter. And soot particles can lodge deep in the lungs and enter the bloodstream, so it's very serious. And it's super unhealthy, dangerous for kids. It's dangerous for everybody, but specifically for kids, as we mentioned before, their lungs are still developing. If they breathe this stuff in, it can really kind of stunt their development of their lungs and their respiratory system. So we want to make sure that we're mitigating that as much as possible. So here we go. Asthma. As we know, asthma is a chronic lung disease that causes repeated episodes of wheezing, breathlessness, chest tightness, and coughing. I'm sure all of us know at least one person in our families, in our communities, at work, somebody within our immediate circle who suffers from asthma. I remember growing up, asthma was one of the most uh, talked about kind of health conditions in my community. And a lot of times people always correlated with just it being hereditary. Like, I grew up in Battle Creek on the north side of Battle Creek where there's a heavy industrial presence from the cereal factories. And people would always say, when they have asthma outbreaks, it's just in my family, right? It's something I just got from my elders. But it's like often what you don't know is that it's directly correlated with the communities that we live in as well. Asthma is sincerely a national epidemic. It affects over 26 million people, including 7 million children, and it's going up every year. And it's the most common chronic disease in childhood, affecting 1 in 10 American children. And it's also the third leading cause of hospitalizations among children under the age of 15. All right. We got a question from Ann Haynes. So Ann asks, how can other school districts get involved? She has someone in Muskegon area who's trying to get their school districts on the wait list. And what I'll do is we'll make sure that you have my contact information before we get off the stream, and I can make sure to get you the information as to how people can get on those waiting lists. But it's also available if you just search the EPA Clean School Bus Program. There's information on the EPA's website, but you can also connect with me directly. Any other questions? Before we move forward, I wanted to just share a couple other kind of statistics as it relates to air pollutants and air quality. So, electric school buses account for less than half the greenhouse gas emissions of diesel. So, just by transitioning to electric school buses, we can cut our pollutants down to half. Um, there's also other data that suggests updating and replacing aging school buses could lead to 1.3 million fewer daily absences per year from reduced exposure to exhaust fumes. So we know that often when we look at you look at absentee and students being absent in schools, it's directly connected with asthma, right? So this data shows that if we can transition to cleaner school buses, that's 1.3 million fewer daily absences per year. I think that's pretty significant. And it also estimates that at least 25 million children I'm going to say that again. At least 25 million children ride the school bus. An average bus an average bus lasts for 16 years before it's being decommissioned. A new school bus can cost anywhere from 100,000 to 300,000, and repairing those school buses can cost anywhere from 10,000 per bus. So there's a huge money savings as well. All right. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the presentation. All right. So current child asthma by state. Here's a quick graph that kind of shows you the breakdown of asthma rates per state. If you look, we all see where Michigan is at, and we are literally about 2 shades away from the max, right? We see areas that are a little worse off than us, a little bit further on the East Coast, Philadelphia, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and then really, if you look in North Carolina, Alabama, they have the highest asthma rates. But Michigan, we're not in the best space as well. And this is according to data from the American Lung Association from 2018. There was also a study that was just released this year that showed that Detroit was the worst city as it relates to individuals living with asthma in the whole country. So it's a real issue for not just West Michigan, but for Michigan as a whole. Some more data on asthma in Michigan youth. There's a youth risk behavior survey. It's an ongoing national school-based survey they conducted every 2 years, and they sample 9th grade through 12th grade students. And the whole purpose of the survey is to learn about the various health risks amongst youth. These behaviors include alcohol, tobacco use, diet, physical activity, and others. It also measures the prevalence of asthma and obesity. And here's some data that was found here from the survey back in 2017. So it says the United States, for youth who have ever been told they have asthma, was 22.5%. So that's the national kind of data as it relates to youth that have been told that they have asthma. And Michigan's even higher. Michigan, we fall somewhere at a little over 26%, which were the 7th highest in the country. That's pretty bad. Our students are breathing in some of the worst air in the country. That's a good question. We got another question here in the comment from Mr. Leonard Eisen. Is that pollution coming from other states? We do know that often pollution, is pushed from other areas. There's a plant not too far that Consumers Energy has called the Campbell plant, and a lot of our poor air quality is coming directly from that plant. So it could be from other areas, it could be from other states, but we know that right here in our own communities, it's a major issue as well with a lot of the conditions that we face here. A good question, Leonard. A few more data points about trends in lifetime asthma. Michigan's lifetime asthma prevalence was significantly higher than the national rate from 2003 through 2007, and it increased by 5.1% during between 2003 and 2017. So it's only getting worse. And the current asthma amongst Michigan youth, it says 13.2% of Michigan youth reported having current asthma. Of that, Black youth are coming at 16.6%, Hispanic youth at 14.5%, as they are coming at a higher rate compared to white youth at 12.6%. It's pretty alarming considering the population makeup that, as we've consistently seen, where BIPOC communities are being hit the hardest. In 2017, it shows that 11.8% of male youth reported having current asthma compared to 14.7% of female youth. So it's actually, harming our young females at a higher rate. And that's based on data from 2017. Let's talk a little bit about the economic costs from asthma. This study here from the Annals of the American Thoracic Society, this is from 2018, it shows that the total economic costs from asthma, so the the total dollar amount that we spend out related to asthma, that includes missed school days, it includes deaths, it includes healthcare. The total number is $81.9 billion. $81.9 billion. If we can cut that in half, that would allow a minimum of $40 billion that we could invest in other areas, i.e., our education system. But, that's a huge savings. So, the breakdown of the $81.9 billion is about $3 billion goes to missed school and work days, about $29 billion goes toward mortality, and at the largest number, over half, that's $50.3 billion is what we spend toward healthcare costs as it relates to asthma. It's a huge issue as it relates to spending in healthcare. $50 billion is a massive number. Here's a little bit more information about asthma rates by county. If you look here, we are somewhere in the middle, so we're not too far off. But still, as we see across the state, you get a little bit more east. It looks like it gets a little worse, but we're right there in the thick of it as well. Michigan's asthma hospitalization rate was 9.8 per 10,000 during this time period, and only six other counties had asthma hospitalization rates above that state rate. Here's a little bit more information about child asthma hospitalizations. If you see Kent County, we're somewhere toward the bottom of the list here. We come in just at about 8 per 10,000. And that's among children under the age of 18. So as we transition and prepare to close out a little bit, we want to go ahead and just drive it home a little further. Why electric school buses? So there's nearly, like I mentioned before, 25 million children and over 480,000 school buses across this country. About 95% of them are currently running using diesel. We know that diesel is directly connected to asthma, bronchitis, cancer, and other respiratory diseases. And we know it hits our young people the hardest. Their lungs are still developing, and they spend the majority of the time outside. And also, the other part of this is we know that, BIPOC and underserved communities, they are not as privileged to maybe get a ride to school or have a school that's within walking distance. So a lot of them rely on these school buses to get to and from school. So it's definitely affecting us at a higher rate. And traffic pollution as well, right? From diesel cars, trucks, and buses. It's the number one source of carbon emissions in the United States, almost twice as lethal as car accidents. Who would have known that? Traffic pollution is almost twice as lethal as car accidents. And I know that car accidents is one of the top, causes of death. So traffic pollution is almost twice as lethal than that. Again, talking a little bit more about the benefits of school buses. So by moving to an all-electric fleet across the country, we can prevent 5.3 million tons of pollution per year. 5.3 million tons of pollution per year we can prevent if we transition an all-electric school bus fleet. We know that electric school buses cost nearly 19 cents per gallon to operate, while diesel school buses cost approximately 82% per gallon. So there's a huge significant savings in the cost of operation if we can transition to electric school buses. And we know that also, as I mentioned before, it creates green jobs within communities. So there'll be a lot of new jobs and new entrepreneurial opportunities that'll come about, not just from the electric school bus piece, but from the whole electric vehicle transition. Just had the opportunity to attend the My Healthy Climate Conference this past week in Detroit, Michigan, and learned a lot about a ton of workforce development opportunities and funding opportunities as it relates to entrepreneurial opportunities and jobs in this green space. So definitely make sure that you all are paying attention and staying aware of the opportunities. There'll be an influx of jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities in the pipeline here in the near future. So here's kind of next steps. So the first step is the school district must apply for the funding. And there was a question that came up when we hosted part one of the webinar. We understand that here in Grand Rapids, there's a separate body, Dean Transportation, who facilitates and handles the school bus transportation. So the question was asked that being that we have a third party company who handles that, who would apply? The school district is still the entity that must apply for the funding, and then they can determine whether they want to use that in-house or use that to support their third-party vendor. And the EPA clean school bus rebates are one type, and there's several other opportunities as well. So the Diesel Emission Reduction Act rebates, the USDA Community Facilities Loan and Grant Program, as well as the IIJA funding are all other ways that you can seek funding for this initiative as well. So uh, even if you get awarded from the EPA, there may be a need for additional funding to help fulfill the full needs of transitioning. And these are three other opportunities to obtain funding for that as well. The process is randomized. So once they apply, they just kind of do a random kind of draw, and those who get selected, they get on the list. The EPA released its first set of awards back in October of 2022. They granted almost $913 million for nearly 2,500 new school buses, and that was across 391 school districts that serve a combined 2.64 million students. So it looks like, based on the timeline, there's going to be about $1 billion every year that's going to be distributed out to school districts across the country. And we want to make sure that Grand Rapids Public Schools and our other school districts are a part of those who are able to benefit from this funding. $1 billion per year. And the EPA also announced a wait list. There's a wait list of up to 1,400 schools that requested more than 9,000 additional buses. The next application period is expected to open within the next few months. So we need you all to attend your school bus meetings, talk to your school bus, your school district, those who serve on the school board and those who work in GRPS. Talk to anybody you can. Talk to the students, to your kids, and encourage them to speak to their school, speak to the board, make public comment, do whatever we need to do to make sure that Grand Rapids Public Schools is on that waiting list that's going to open here in the next few months. This slide is not as clear, but if you can kind of see, this gives a visual as to where the first round of awards went. We see a good majority of them were already distributed in the Midwest and the East Coast, with several going to Michigan. But if you really look closely, the majority of the awards in Michigan that were distributed during the first round were all on the east side of the state. There were a few on the west side, but the majority of them were on the east side of the state. So we got to get in the game, you all. It's too much funding for us to miss out, and our kids deserve better. So let's go ahead and talk with our school board and make sure they get on the waiting list. So here's a little bit more information about the different mechanisms available to support districts in acquiring electric school buses. Again, we talked a little bit about this on the previous slide. There are grants available. There's rebates available. There's what you call vouchers, which is basically a credit that's applied to purchase those school buses. And then there's financing as well. So there's multiple different avenues. This one specifically we're pushing is the EPA grant, but it's not limited to that. There's other funding opportunities as well. And what does this mean for NAACP? So we have to be engaged. We need to make sure that people are aware. Again, we're asking you to have these conversations in your homes, churches, visit your local school. We'll make sure the slide deck is shared. Let them know about this opportunity. We need to get more information from people on the ground. What are they hearing? What are they seeing? And then there'll be more webinars as well. The next webinar that we'll be hosting will be in conjunction with representatives from the national office, and they're going to actually provide a template that we can provide to you all where you can send letters to your school board members. There'll be a script where you can go and make public comment, and even some information and text that you can use for op-eds and blogs. Stay tuned for that next webinar. We haven't scheduled the date just yet, It may be within the next month, but we'll make sure to get that information out to you all. Just stay tuned to NAACP's website, social media platforms, as we'll be getting that information out in the coming weeks. A little bit more information as we prepare to close out about how you can engage with school members and school district staff. School districts have to engage with stakeholders on these decisions, right? It's required under what's called the Every Student Succeeds Act. So if you speak with somebody and they say they're not interested to have these conversations, you let them know this is a requirement under the Every Student Succeeds Act, and we need to make sure that this is taken seriously. The school board adopts rules and policies, which are called board policies, and those policies govern the school employees and the students. So they must ensure that those board policies don't conflict with the law or rules adopted by the State Department of Education. So it's extremely important that we're engaging with our school board and just encouraging them to get on the wait list. That's the ask. Here's a couple of different ways that you can engage. The school district is going to be responsible for a couple of things. They're going to be responsible for purchasing the fleet of buses. They're going to be responsible for asking the EPA for funding or getting on that waiting list. And they're also going to be responsible for the school bus fleet director who makes those decisions regarding electric school bus needs. What can you do as an NAACP member and as a leader? Set up a meeting with your school district, whoever the lead is for the bus and the transportation program. Tell them you want to meet with them. You need to, there's some information they need to be aware of. Go ahead and schedule those meetings. Again, as I mentioned before, make public comment. Show up to those school board meetings. Don't be afraid to step up. I think you get about 3 minutes to share your concerns. Attend those school board meetings. Let them know about this EPA Clean School Bus Program. And lastly, you can send a letter to the County Office of Education or directly to the school board, letting them know that you want them to support this initiative. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to make at our next webinar or even prior to that, we'll have a letter template that you all can use and share with your school board, with GRPS specifically, to get them to sign up. So as we conclude the presentation, I want to make sure that before we get into Q&A, I want to give a huge thanks to NAACP Grand Rapids branch for understanding the importance of getting this information out. Also want to open it up to you all. Now is your opportunity to ask any questions, share any thoughts, concerns with me. Again, I am in direct communication with Bray Connor and those at the national office. So if there are questions that come about that I'm unable to answer, I'll make sure to get the information and get it back to you all. And again, I want to make sure that you all stay tuned for more information about the part 3 webinar, where we're going to get a little bit more deeper into the specifics. We're going to provide templates and scripts and really equip you all to go ahead and make this step from education to action. So any other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? Now is the opportunity to go ahead and share those. You can share them in the chat or in the comment section. Just go ahead and comment and we'll make sure that those are addressed. Any questions? And again, just as a recap, the few questions that did come during the presentation, one was about the slides. I'll make sure to get these slides to Ahmad, and Clee, and they can share those with you all. I'm assuming they'll probably post them on the website where you can access the slide deck. And also, I think we kind of answered your question, Ann, about how school districts can get involved. But again, we'll make sure if we can. I'm going to go ahead and just put my email in the chat right now. And if you want, go ahead and reach out to me directly and we can make sure they get that information. Any other questions? Also, as I mentioned earlier during the presentation, we are recording this session. So we'll give us a few days. We'll make sure that this is loaded to the NAACP YouTube. You can share the link so others can view this at a later time. Doesn't look like we have any other questions, so I want to go ahead and thank everyone again for your time. Again, I know there's several other things you could be doing at 7:15 in your evening, but again, this is an extremely important initiative, and we want to make sure that you all are equipped with the information and educated and aware as to how we can advocate for better air quality, better economic opportunities, and healthier environments in our community. With that said, my name is Kareem Scales with Scales Consulting. I want to also give a huge thanks to the team over at NAACP. We're going to go ahead and close out and stay tuned for more information. Have a great rest of your evening.